Have you ever wondered why there are two major branches of Christianity, Catholic and Orthodox? What caused one of the greatest divides in church history? Was it about power, culture, or something even deeper? In this video, we'll uncover the shocking events of the Great Schism of 1054, what really happened, why it matters today, and how it shaped Christianity as we know it. Stay tuned, because the answers might surprise you.
You know, I've always been kind of fascinated by this whole idea of a deep dive, really getting to the heart of something. And well, today we're going deep into a part of history that might be a bit of a blind spot for a lot of folks. The Orthodox Church.
Okay.
Now, you've probably heard the term Greek Orthodox at some point.
Yeah.
But that's just scratching the surface.
Right.
It's like thinking all breakfast cereal is Chex just because you had wheat Chex once.
That's a great analogy.
And here's a fact that might surprise you. The Orthodox Church, it's actually the second largest single Christian church in the entire world.
Wow.
250 million members.
It's a really significant thing,
Yeah.
because it considers itself one unified body.
Oh, wow.
Unlike Protestantism, which is so vast and fragmented.
That's huge. So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack the event that actually split the Catholic and Orthodox churches, the Great Schism of 1054, a rift that, believe it or not, continues to this very day.
And to really understand this split, you almost have to grasp the fact that it wasn't some overnight breakup.
Right.
It was centuries in the making, like a slow burn of tensions and disagreements.
Okay, so let's rewind the historical tape here.
Yeah.
What were some of the key ingredients in this slow motion collision?
Well, politically, the legacy of Constantine
Yeah.
and his vision of this unified Christian empire, it played a huge role.
Okay.
He brought the East and West together under Christianity. But as time marched on, that unity, it became increasingly fragile.
So cracks are already starting to show even way back then.
Exactly. The Byzantine Emperor's influence over the West, it waned, and the rise of the Holy Roman Empire in the West. That further cemented that divide.
Yeah.
You could almost picture these two centers of power just drifting apart.
Okay, so we've got this geographic and political separation brewing. Did that then kind of seep into how the church itself was structured?
Absolutely. In the East, they had this model of multiple patriarchs. Think of them as regional leaders,
Right.
governing collaboratively. The Patriarch of Constantinople was considered first among equals, a bit like a council making decisions together.
Okay, so a more distributed power structure in the East. What about the West?
The West was moving in a different direction, with a growing emphasis on papal supremacy. The idea that the Pope in Rome held ultimate authority.
So this fundamental difference in how they viewed authority, that had to create some friction.
It was a major source of conflict,
Yeah.
and that tension played out in some pretty interesting ways.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. What were some of the flashpoints, the specific clashes that really illustrate this power struggle in action?
Well, one fascinating example is the iconoclasm controversy.
Okay.
The Byzantine East actually tried to ban religious icons,
Wow.
paintings, statues, that sort of thing. But the West, they pushed back hard.
So even religious art became this battleground for authority. That's wild.
It really highlights how deeply these differences ran. And it wasn't just about art.
It was about who got to decide what was acceptable religious practice.
Right, that makes total sense. Were there other controversies like that?
Oh, absolutely. Another big one, and this might sound a bit obscure at first, was the Filioque controversy. Now, stick with me here, because this seemingly minor theological detail, it caused a huge G-rift.
Okay, I'm all ears. Break it down for me.
So the Filioque refers to a tiny addition to the Nicene Creed,
Okay.
one of the most important statements of faith in Christianity.
Right.
The original creeds stated that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father, right? But the West, they added "and the Son," the Filioque. The West was concerned about Arianism. It was a heresy that denied Christ's full divinity. The Filioque was meant to reinforce that the Son was equal to the Father, and therefore the Holy Spirit proceeded from both.
So the West saw it as a clarification, but the East saw it as tampering.
Exactly. They argued that the creed couldn't be changed without a council where everyone agreed. So again, it boils down to authority. Who gets to make the decisions?
It's a recurring theme, isn't it? And here's a fascinating historical tidbit. that shows just how sensitive this issue remained even centuries later. In 2004, Pope John Paul II and the Patriarch of Constantinople, they deliberately omitted the Filioque when reciting the creed together.
Wow, talk about a powerful gesture of reconciliation. Even if it's just symbolic, it really highlights how these ancient disagreements still resonate today.
Absolutely. And these simmering tensions, these clashes over authority and doctrine, they all set the stage for what happened in 1054, the dramatic climax of this centuries-long buildup.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork, we've seen the fault lines developing. Now in part 2, we're going to dive into the year 1054 and unpack the events that truly shattered the unity of the church. You won't want to miss it.
So remember all those tensions we were talking about, all those theological disputes and power struggles? Well, they finally reached a boiling point in 1054.
Okay, I'm ready for the fireworks. What lit the fuse?
It all started with a letter, a very controversial letter, actually, written by Leo, the Archbishop of Ohrid in the East.
A letter that's going to kick off the Great Schism. Okay, I'm intrigued. What did it say?
This letter was essentially like a laundry list of complaints about Western practices. Leo, he took aim at everything, from the Filioque to the use of unleavened bread in the Eucharist.
Oh.
He even went so far as to accuse the West of adopting Jewish practices.
Wow, throwing some serious shade there. That couldn't have gone over well in Rome.
You're telling me. The letter made its way to Pope Leo IX, and let's just say he wasn't thrilled. He fired back a letter of his own to Patriarch Michael I of Constantinople, trying to set the record straight from his perspective.
So we've got a full-blown diplomatic row brewing here. What happens next?
Well, the Pope decided to send a delegation to Constantinople to try and, smooth things over.
Okay.
Or maybe it was more about asserting his authority.
Yeah.
Either way, the man he chose to lead this delegation was none other than Humbert of Silva Candida.
Ah, Humbert, our old friend. Fluent in Greek and not exactly known for his diplomatic skills. This is where things get really interesting, right?
You bet. Humbert, he was on a mission to defend the Pope's supremacy, and he wasn't about to back down. When he and his entourage arrived in Constantinople in 1054, they were met with, well, the ultimate power play.
Okay, I'm picturing some serious Byzantine-style drama here. What happened?
Patriarch Michael the Rest basically gave them the cold shoulder. He refused to meet with them for weeks.
Oh, wow.
It was a classic strategy. Make them wait, show them who's boss.
I bet Humbert was fuming.
You can imagine. He saw it as a grave insult, both to himself and to the Pope. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife.
So they finally meet. What happens? Do they manage to hash things out?
Not even close. The meeting was basically a shouting match. All those pent-up frustrations, all those theological disputes, the power struggles, it all came pouring out.
It's almost hard to believe that something as monumental as the Great Schism could hinge on these personal conflicts, on hurt egos and power plays.
Yeah, it's a reminder that history is often shaped by human flaws and miscommunication as much as by grand ideas,
So how did this tense meeting finally come to an end? Did they just agree to disagree?
Oh, it was much more dramatic than that. The whole thing came to a head on Easter Sunday of all days. Picture this. Michael is in the Hagia Sophia, the most magnificent church in Constantinople, leading the Easter Vigil. And suddenly, Humbert bursts in.
Oh, boy. I'm sensing this isn't going to end well. What does he do?
In a move straight out of a historical drama, Humbert marches right up to the altar and slaps down a bull of excommunication.
He excommunicated the Patriarch on Easter Sunday?
On Easter Sunday.
Wow. Talk about adding insult to injury. That's a power move and a half. What was Michael's reaction?
Well, he wasn't about to take that lying down. Michael retaliated by excommunicating Humbert and the entire papal delegation.
So basically, they declared each other heretics in the middle of one of the holiest days of the year.
Pretty much. It was an epic showdown, a complete and utter breakdown of communication.
It's almost comical in a tragic sort of way, this centuries-long buildup of tension, and it all culminates in this very public, very messy spectacle.
And the irony is that no one at the time thought this petty squabble would create a permanent rift. They probably thought they'd patch things up eventually.
But they didn't. What started as a clash of personalities and a theological debate escalated into a schism that would reshape the religious landscape of the world. And that's a story for part 3. It's amazing to think that a single event, as dramatic as it was, could fracture the Christian world for for centuries. Did those involved understand the magnitude of what had just happened in 1054?
You know, that's what's so fascinating, the full weight of the schism. It didn't hit right away. In the immediate aftermath, life in both the East and the West continued, well, much as it had before.
So if it wasn't this sudden catastrophic break, how did this rift solidify into the separate churches we know today?
It's helpful to think of it like a slow and steady drip of water eroding a stone. Over time, the misunderstandings deepen, fueled by, language barriers, cultural differences, and yes, even political rivalries.
You mentioned political rivalries. Did any specific events really widen the gap between East and West?
Well, the Crusades, for example,
Yeah.
they played a tragic role. Initially intended to liberate the Holy Land, they end up kind of highlighting the growing divide between Eastern and Western Christianity.
How so?
Well, imagine you're in Constantinople, the heart of the Eastern Church, right? And suddenly you have these Western European crusaders marching through, often with little regard for your customs or traditions. It created resentment and mistrust on both sides.
You can definitely see how that would further alienate the two branches of Christianity. So how does all of this history of schism and division, how does it connect to the world we live in today? Why should this ancient drama matter to us now?
Understanding the Great Schism, it gives you incredible insight into the modern religious landscape. It helps you grasp why there's so many different branches of Christianity, each with its own distinct history and traditions. It even sheds light on the geopolitical tensions that still exist between East and West today.
It's like having a key to unlock a really complex puzzle. And it makes you think about the power of those seemingly small theological disputes, right?
Absolutely. The Filioque controversy, for example, it might seem like a minor theological quibble to the untrained eye,
Yeah.
but it represents a fundamentally different understanding of the Trinity.
And that difference in understanding had enormous consequences, ultimately leading to the split we're talking about.
Precisely. Yeah. And those consequences are still felt today, not just within Christianity, but in the broader cultural and political landscape.
So what can we learn from this deep dive into the Great Schism? What's the takeaway for our listeners?
Perhaps the most important lesson is that unity, once broken, is incredibly difficult to restore.
Yeah.
It requires humility, empathy, and a willingness to engage in dialogue, even, or perhaps especially, when those dialogues are difficult.
It's a reminder that even seemingly small disagreements, if left unaddressed, can have far-reaching consequences, and that the echoes of those disagreements can resonate for centuries.
It also prompts us to consider how history might have unfolded differently, had there been more understanding, more compassion, more willingness to find common ground.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive, full of twists and turns, triumphs and tragedies, and I think you've left our listeners with a lot to ponder.
My hope is that it sparks a curiosity to learn even more, to delve deeper into the rich tapestry of Christian history and the ongoing dialogue between different faith traditions.
Well said. And for those of you listening, I encourage you to continue exploring this fascinating chapter of history. As you might be surprised at what you discover. Until next time, keep diving deep.